They didn't call me by name. They called me Hound. Loyal, quiet, and disposable. Let me speak before my tongue fails me for good. My name, it's not important anymore. The forest doesn't whisper it, the wind doesn't carry it. But the memories, they cling like sap to old bark. So before the last breath leaves this ruin of a body, let me tell you what they did to me, what I allowed, what I became. I was the royal hunter. And then I was the prince's target. But to understand how I ended up bleeding in the dirt like a boar, laughing nobles aiming arrows at my spine, you have to start where my scent trail begins, in mud, in hunger, in silence. I was born in a village that didn't deserve a name. One of those clusters of thatched roofs wedged between forest and river, forgotten by maps and remembered only when the king's tacksmen came. We were people of dirt and ash, sons of stone, daughters of cold bread. My mother died before I could spell her name. My father lasted longer, but he died long before he was buried, bent and broken by the plow and by loss. I grew up half-starved and fully invisible, and that made me perfect. I learned the forest not from books, not from old men, but from necessity. If I didn't track, I didn't eat. If I didn't move quiet, I didn't see the morning. My fingers were small but steady. My eyes knew how to find broken twigs and follow blood trails. I listened more than I spoke, and the animals, they listened to that. By the time I was 15, I had already killed more than most men twice my age, not for pleasure, for bread, for soup, for survival. One morning, I was gutting a hare near the river when 3 riders arrived, cloaked in black and silver, their horses bred for war, their boots cleaner than anything I had ever touched. At first, I ran, thought they were soldiers come to punish the village again, but they didn't chase me, they watched. Later, the elder called for me, said the men wanted a boy with good eyes and a clean draw, said they'd seen me work, said it was an honor. I didn't know what royal appointment meant, I didn't care. All I knew was that they handed my father 2 coins, more than we'd seen in a year, and I was told to pack what little I had. That was the last time I saw the village. No one waved, no one wept, just smoke curling from cold chimneys as I disappeared behind armored hooves. The capital was a wound in the land, wide, loud, paved with gold that only touched boots of those who already had more than they needed. I was taken past the markets, past the stables, through stone halls that smelled of spice and perfume, and eventually to a man with a voice like gravel and a scar that ran from temple to jaw. He looked me over, didn't ask my name, just said, quiet, obedient, sharp. Then, you'll do, you'll serve. I was given a tunic, rough wool, black and green, the king's colors, a bow, not as fine as the ones in the noble racks, but straight and strong, and a room beneath the barracks that stank of sweat and wet dogs. I slept beside other boys, boys like me, taken, not asked, quiet, not respected. We were trained to be shadows, to shoot on command, to track beasts, kill clean, and stay silent. The nobility didn't care how we bled, only that their tables stayed full and their hunts felt thrilling. They called us hounds, not men, hounds. And we wagged our tails when they threw us scraps. I killed for them. Stags, boars, bears, wolves, once even a lion, brought from across the sea just so the prince could watch it die beneath his banner. I remember that day well. The lion hadn't eaten in days. They loosed it into a ring, starved and confused. It roared once, then looked around for escape. The prince missed his first arrow, laughed like it was a game, then turned to me and said, "Show me how it's done, hound." I didn't want to, but I drew, I loosed, the beast fell, and the court cheered. But I didn't sleep that night. In the years that followed, I became necessary. I was sent ahead of royal hunting parties to track and tire the prey, to bleed the animals just enough for the nobles to come up and finish the kill with applause. I became a specialist in staging, Blood, yes, but controlled blood. Drama, pain, but beautiful pain. I was rewarded. A bed with straw, meat on my plate, a pouch with coin. But never a name. The prince grew older and meaner. He learned to enjoy watching fear more than death. He'd shoot arrows close to my feet when I knelt to track, laugh when I flinched. He once asked me to slit a doe's throat while he stared into her eyes, said he wanted to see the moment the light goes out. I did it. I always did it. Because I thought loyalty was armor. I thought obedience would protect me. But obedience is just another name for the leash, and mine was wrapped tight around my neck. There was a day, I remember it like fire on my hands, when the prince brought a girl into the woods, a servant girl, young, pale, trembling. He said she was to observe the wild, but I saw it in his eyes. Predator. He ordered me to lead them deep into the trees. He told me to bring no others. He smiled, like a man who thinks God watches only him. That was the first day I considered disappearing, vanishing into the woods and never coming back. But I didn't, because I was the hound, and hounds don't run. They wait, and sometimes they bite. Every beast I killed made the king stronger, and made me emptier. They fed us meat, but only after we bled for it. I used to think a full stomach meant I was rising in the world, that the heaviness in my gut was the weight of reward. But now I know better. That fullness, it was the silence. The weight of every kill I didn't speak about. Every life I ended with a clean draw and a hollow chest. They didn't ask me to be loyal. They expected it. It wasn't long after the lion, that cursed lion, that I was summoned to the stone chamber beneath the east wing. It wasn't part of the palace proper. It was older, colder. It smelled like mildew and iron. The torches flickered as if afraid of the shadows. The man waiting there wasn't dressed like the others. No sigil on his chest, no pride in his stance, just a black cloak and eyes like frozen water. "You've done well," he said, voice as flat as the stone table between us. I didn't answer. He set down a piece of parchment, unrolled it slowly. On it, the outline of a wooded region, one I didn't recognize. He tapped a circle near the edge. "You'll go here. There's a man. He's stirring the wrong kind of thoughts, speaking too loud in taverns, quoting the wrong gods. The crown wants the matter quieted." I blinked, not from surprise, but from the ache in my chest, the one that warned me I'd crossed a line I didn't even see coming. "I'm not a soldier," I muttered. "No," he said, "you're better. You don't wear colors. You leave no trail." I remember my hands clenching then, involuntarily, like they wanted to throw the bow down, to scream that I was no murderer. But I didn't, because by then I already was. I rode that night, alone, no banner, no escort, just me, my quiver, and the memory of every beast I'd ever killed, staring at my back like ghosts. The man they wanted gone was nothing like the traitors I imagined. He was soft-spoken, mid-40s, a herbalist by trade. He lived near a stream, far from town, with 3 children and a dog that barked like a broken bell. When I watched from the woods, I saw nothing dangerous in him. But danger, I had learned, was not about swords or sermons. It was about influence, about which ears you touched when you spoke. And his words had reached the wrong ears. I followed him for 2 days. Waited for the right moment, a quiet one, without witnesses. On the 3rd evening, he went to the stream alone to fetch water. I took the shot from behind a fallen oak, right between the shoulders. Clean, fast. He didn't scream. He dropped the bucket before the body. I buried him with my own hands. No one saw, no one came. No questions were asked when I returned. Just a nod from the man with the ice eyes, and more parchment. That was the first. There were others.
Dissenters, smugglers, a former scribe accused of passing secrets across the river, a servant girl who knew too much. Once, a stable boy, only 12. They said he had listened at a keyhole he shouldn't have. I refused that one. I told them no. They didn't insist. They simply gave the task to someone else. But they never gave me coin for that week, and when I passed the kitchens, no meat waited for me. Silence in a palace like that is louder than punishment. So I kept going, kept killing. Not always people, often animals. The crown loved its spectacles, loved to send ambassadors from other realms into the woods and have them witness our tradition. Royal hunts, staged events where the guests would shoot, laugh, drink, and I would do the work they would celebrate. I would track the beasts, tire them, bleed them, so the nobles could arrive and land a glorious arrow in a dying creature already half dead. Once I was asked to sedate a bear with crushed poppy mixed into bait. They wanted the visiting duke's daughter to strike the final blow, a gift for her birthday. She missed the heart, hit the lung. The bear screamed. I was not allowed to finish it. Let her do it, they said. It took her 3 arrows. 3! The creature wheezed blood onto her boots as she posed for her portrait, and I stood behind the trees, gripping my bow so tight it splintered in my hand. Later, that same girl passed me in the corridor. She didn't recognize me. She never had. Because men like me, we were not part of their stories. We were the ones who carved the stories into flesh and bone so they could wear glory like perfume. The king once called me his most faithful shadow. He said it in jest, in front of guests. They laughed. I smiled. But I remember thinking, a shadow is only seen when the light is dying. The prince, though, he was different. He didn't just use me, he watched me. There was something in his eyes whenever I returned from a kill. Not admiration, not even amusement. It was hunger, but not the kind that wants food. The kind that wants control. He would call me Hound even when others used my title. He once told me, "You know what I like about you. You never question, never flinch. I could tell you to shoot the moon and you'd try." And the worst part? He wasn't wrong. I had become what they made me, a man-shaped blade. Silent, sharp, disposable. I had killed for the crown, killed for fear, killed for comfort. But inside, a part of me had begun to rot, to rebel, to remember. And one day, not long from then, I would stop flinching, not out of loyalty, but because I'd already chosen where to die.
He never looked at the animal, only at me, as if he wanted to see how far I would crawl. There are many kinds of killers in this world: the desperate, the obedient, the broken. And then there are the ones who smile while they do it, the ones who treat death like theater and skin like parchment. The prince was one of those. He wasn't born cruel, no one is, but he was raised to believe nothing could touch him, not the cries of peasants, not the weight of the gods, and certainly not the blood he spilled. His crown was invisible but heavier than steel, and it bent him from the inside out. I first met him when he was 16. I had just returned from an assignment in the Western Marsh, a job I still don't like to think about, when I was summoned to the inner courtyard for a private hunt. Only a handful of guards, no nobles, just him. He was lean, pale, hair tied back in silk, but his eyes, they were older than they should have been. Not tired, calculating. Like a boy who'd read every chapter on cruelty and wanted to write his own. "You're the hunter," he said. I nodded. "You don't speak much, do you?" I shook my head. "Good. Dogs shouldn't speak unless told to." That was the first time he called me that, dog. It made the guards snicker. I said nothing, but I felt something in my jaw tighten, a little muscle I hadn't noticed in years. He handed me a ribbon,
red silk. "Tie this to the deer's neck," he said. "Make it run. I want to see if I can shoot it from the cliffs." "From the cliffs?" I asked, breaking the rule, speaking. "Yes," he smiled. "I like when it falls." It took me 4 hours to track, tag, and push the animal toward the cliffside path. He shot it clean. Watched it tumble in silence. When it hit the rocks below, he laughed. Not loud, not wild, just satisfied, like a painter admiring his brushwork. That became a game. Not once, not twice, but many times. He would invent rules. Only red stags, only black boars, only one arrow, only on horseback. He once challenged himself to shoot between 2 trees while riding at full speed. The deer had no chance. It was already limping. I had injured it before release. But he missed. The arrow struck a tree. He didn't speak for 10 seconds. Then he turned to me. "That was your fault." I blinked. "My lord?" "You set the path wrong." I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. That night, I found a dead raven nailed to my door. No message, just blood. He never said anything about it the next day, but when I passed him in the hall, he smiled wider than usual. I started to see how he looked at me. Not with respect, not even disdain. Curiosity. Like a child pulling the legs off a beetle to see what would happen. He started giving me stranger orders. Make the deer walk in circles before the kill. Smear blood on a tree and make the animal stop near it. Blind a boar and see how it runs. At first, I obeyed. I told myself it was temporary, that he was a boy, that he'd grow out of it. But he didn't. He'd grow into it. One morning, he had me bring in a white doe from the royal preserves, a rare creature, one the queen herself had once ordered protected. The prince said he wanted to test a new arrow, barbed and heavier than usual. I hesitated. He saw it. "Something wrong, dog?" "The queen forbade." He interrupted. "The queen isn't here." I stared at the doe. She was trembling. She didn't belong here. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If you don't tie her to the post, I'll use you for the test." I did it. He missed the heart on purpose. Watched her writhe. Then handed me the blade. "Finish it," he said, smiling. "She's not screaming loud enough for me." That was the night I stopped eating meat. That was the night I realized the animals weren't the ones being hunted anymore. It was me. Each task he gave grew more twisted. He made me kneel in the snow for an hour to learn patience. Had a stag chase me through a clearing just to see how fast I could run. Once, he fired an arrow that shaved a piece of my ear, then claimed it was a mistake. The courtiers said nothing. They laughed when he laughed, whispered when he whispered. And I stayed silent. Because I knew the truth. The moment I refused, I'd stop being useful. And when you stop being useful in a palace like this, you don't disappear. You become an example. Still, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet, but something colder. Something that began to count the days, the arrows, the glances. The last straw came when he brought guests from the northern provinces, sons of lords, men who had never touched blood without gloves. He told them he had a new game. "Today," he said, "we hunt the hunter." The men laughed, thought he was joking, but I saw his eyes. He wasn't. He never joked. I smiled, nodded, played along. But inside, I began to plan. Not escape, not revenge, just survival. Because deep down, I knew. Dogs get old, and when they do, princes get bored.
I said no, just once, and that was enough. It was early autumn, the kind of morning when the forest smells like wet leaves and smoke, when the air is cold enough to sting your lungs, but not enough to chase you back indoors. The kind of day I used to love, before everything turned sour. I was called to the west gate before sunrise. No formal summons, no feast, just a stable hand shaking me awake, eyes wide and unsure. The prince wants you, no delay. I didn't bother asking why. You don't ask why when it comes from him. You move or you suffer. The sky was still dark when I arrived at the clearing near the training yard. A fire crackled. A few horses grazed nearby. The prince stood alone, arms crossed, dressed not in his usual fine cloak, but in riding leathers and boots caked in mud. His expression was different. Focused, cold, not playful like before. I stood at attention, bow slung over my shoulder, waiting. He didn't greet me. He simply gestured to the cart beside him. Inside it was a doe. Small, thin, pregnant. She was alive, barely. Her legs were bound, her mouth tied shut with twine. Her breathing was uneven. Her eyes darted around in panic. The prince turned to me and said, "I want this one tied to the altar at Raven's Hollow." I blinked. Raven's Hollow? That's... "I know where it is," he interrupted. "That's the point." I hesitated. My voice, usually dry and steady, trembled. "She's pregnant," I said. He raised an eyebrow. And there's no sport in it." He stepped toward me slowly, as if trying not to scare something, not the doe, me. "There's no sport in any of this," he said. "You think I care about sport?" He was close now. I could smell the wine on his breath, even that early. He smiled. "I care about spectacle." I stared at him, at the cold in his eyes, at the hunger. I had seen it before, in wolves around a weakened stag. But even wolves have rules. Even wolves kill to survive. This was different. He gestured again. "You'll do it. Tie her up. Make her cry. I want the birds to scatter when the arrow hits." I looked at the doe. Then I looked at him. And for the first time in over a decade of killing, tracking, obeying, I said, "No." His smile faded instantly. "What did you say?" I said, "No." He stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign tongue, like the word didn't belong in his world. "You've never refused me." "I should have," I replied, voice steady now. He walked in a slow circle around me, silent, calculating. The guards near the trees shifted, uncertain whether this was part of a show or the beginning of one. Then he stopped in front of me and tilted his head. "Do you remember what happened to the last man who said no to me?" I said nothing. He continued. "His tongue was hung in the tower, for the birds." I took a breath. "Then hang mine, but I won't tie her." He leaned closer. "You think this is about a deer?" "No. I think this is about what you've become." His hand moved fast, backhand across my jaw. I didn't fall. I didn't react. He struck again, harder. Still, I didn't move. I saw it then. Not power, not rage. Fear. He feared me. Not because I was stronger, but because I had stopped being his. I had broken the illusion. He stepped back and nodded to his guards. "Strip him of rank," he said. But one of them hesitated. "Now." They came at me without force, not yet. They didn't want a scene. But I didn't fight. I took off the cloak myself, dropped the badge, unclipped the quiver. The prince picked up my bow, the one I had carved myself. Years ago, from you I harvested with my father's hatchet. He snapped it over his knee, dropped the pieces in the mud. Then he said, loud enough for all to hear, "You're no longer the king's hound." And then, softer, "But you'll run like one." I didn't understand then, not fully, but I would, soon. Because that wasn't the end. It was the start of the hunt.
They gave me a 10-minute head start, the prince smiled, bow in hand. They didn't lock me in a dungeon. They didn't beat me, didn't cut off my tongue or string me up like the others who had dared to say no. No, they did something worse. They made it a game. I was still wiping blood from my lip when the prince turned to his men and said, almost casually, "Let's make it fair." He tossed my broken bow aside and nodded toward the trees. "Run." At first, I thought I'd misheard. My ears rang from the slap. My pride was still bleeding. "Excuse me, my lord," one of the guards asked, confused. The prince's voice didn't waver. He was the royal hunter. Let's see if he still remembers how to survive. He looked me in the eyes, calm, cold, alive. 10 minutes. If you're still breathing at sunset, you win. I laughed, not because it was funny, because that was the moment I realized what kind of story I was in. Not a man versus king tale, not a rebellion. This was entertainment to them, a hunt, and I was the prize. 10 minutes. They let me keep my boots, nothing else. No weapons, no cloak, no water. I turned toward the trees, tasted iron in my mouth, and ran. Not for glory, not for vengeance, just to live one more hour. The forest greeted me like an old friend with a knife behind its back. The same trees I once moved through in silence now clawed at my face and tore at my sleeves like traitors. The same trails I had carved with memory now blurred with panic and sweat. I could hear them behind me. Not running, not yet. They were laughing, mounting horses, preparing arrows, sharpening blades, enjoying the idea of it. They thought it was a game. They thought I was finished. They were wrong. I didn't run toward the village. I didn't head for roads or clearings. That would be suicide. I went deep, into the old forest, the one few dared enter, the one even the prince only knew through stories whispered in halls, tales of ghosts and beasts that bled black sap. I ran fast, but not far, because I knew better. You don't win a hunt by outrunning your hunters. You win by vanishing. I slid down into a ravine I had marked years ago, a narrow trench covered in brush, invisible from above unless you knew it was there. I waited, breath shallow, heart pounding like war drums. Then I heard the hooves. 7, maybe 8 horses. The prince rode with them. Of course he did. He wouldn't miss this, not for anything. One of the men shouted, "He's headed south." Another, "Tracks near the creek." Wrong, all wrong. I had doubled back, left false prints, snapped branches on purpose, mud smeared against trunks, tricks of the old craft. I stayed there for what felt like an hour, covered in dirt and breathless silence. And then the first arrow. It hit the tree above me, a warning shot. Close, but wide. They were testing, flushing me. I waited longer, muscles cramping, legs numb. Then I moved. Not like a man, like a shadow. Crawling through roots, using fog and instinct. Every step calculated, every noise measured. The forest wasn't just a setting, it was my ally, and I had to become part of it again. I made a sling from my belt and gathered stones. Not much, but enough. Enough to distract. I tossed one toward a distant rock wall. It clattered loud. Voices shouted. They gave chase. The wrong way. I smiled. Just a little. Then I ran again, but not straight, in a spiral, using the terrain like teeth to chew their certainty. By midday, I had covered 3 leagues. I knew they'd split up by now. Classic hunting tactic. Circle the prey, pressure it, collapse inward. But they underestimated one thing. I knew them. I had trained them. They learned from watching me. And they thought I was tired. But I wasn't running on strength anymore. I was running on memory. I reached the cliff pass by late afternoon. The same one where the prince used to shoot deer for fun, watched them tumble like meat puppets. Fitting. I climbed the ridge, barefoot now,
feet blistered and bleeding. I left drops on purpose, blood on bark, sweat on stone. I wanted them to find me there, and they did. Just before dusk, I saw the first horse crest the ridge, then the second, and finally, him, the prince. He looked glorious, even with mud on his boots. He held a long bow, twice the size of mine, golden trim, carved handle, a hunter's toy for a killer's game. He smiled when he saw me standing on the edge of the cliff. I didn't run. I just stood there, waiting, daring. He pulled the bowstring back slowly, savoring the moment. I didn't flinch. He loosed the arrow, and the world exploded in pain.
I felt the arrow tear through me, and still I crawled. It wasn't the first time I'd been shot, but it was the first time someone aimed to humiliate, not kill. I remember the moment with perfect clarity. The cold air, the way the trees leaned in, like even they couldn't look away. The taste of blood already in my mouth, not from the wound, but from biting my tongue, refusing to beg. The prince stood at the top of the ridge, above me, bow in hand, his eyes narrow, focused, not playful, not amused, hungry. He drew the string back as slow as his smile. No need for haste. He had already won. In his mind, this was the final stroke on his masterpiece, and I, the brush. I didn't move. Not because I was brave, but because I wanted him to see it. See that I wouldn't run, that I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of fear. The arrow whistled. I felt the snap before the pain, like someone had cracked a frozen branch inside my shoulder. It passed clean through, just below the collarbone. The force spun me halfway, knocked the breath out of my lungs. I collapsed to my knees. The prince laughed. Not loud, just pleased. "Not bad for an old dog," he called out. The others joined him. Some clapped, one shouted, "Should have gone for the leg, my lord. Let him limp longer." I couldn't answer. Not with my mouth full of iron, not with the world spinning. But I remember blinking. And when I did, I saw his face. He wasn't looking at me like prey anymore. He was looking at me like proof. Proof that he could break what the kingdom once called useful. Proof that loyalty means nothing if it isn't bowed. He dismounted, walked toward me slowly, boots crunching dry leaves, arrow still in hand, blade at his hip. When he reached me, he circled once, examining me like a butcher picking the next cut. "You could have stayed," he said. "You had your place." I didn't answer. He crouched, met my eyes. Why ruin it? I looked up, through the pain, and whispered. Because I finally remembered who I am. His smile faltered for half a second. That was enough. He stood again and turned to the others. "I grow bored," he said. "He'll bleed out. Leave him." "What if he doesn't?" one asked. The prince chuckled. "Then the forest will finish what I started." They mounted, rode off like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just tried to erase me. I laid there for hours. The pain was sharp, but not fatal. Not yet. I knew the difference. I had delivered it enough times to others. I reached for the arrow, still lodged part way in bone, and screamed through my teeth as I snapped it near the entry. No luxury of bandages, no herbs, no warmth, just cold old leaves and the sound of hooves growing distant. The forest didn't move, didn't offer help, but it also didn't reject me, and that was something. I crawled, not because I thought I would make it, but because I refused to let him decide where I died. I crawled with one arm, dragging the rest of me through roots and mud and rock. Night came, with it frost. I welcomed it. Because pain means you're still alive. Cold means the fire hasn't left you entirely. I passed a stone I had carved when I was 16, marking a trail few knew. My old mark was still there, barely visible, hidden behind ivy and years. I smiled through the blood. Even broken, I could still find my way. I collapsed near a hollow tree I once used as shelter during a snowstorm. That night, years ago, I had sworn to never sleep there again, said it smelled like rot and sorrow. But that night, after the shot, it became sanctuary. I tore my shirt into strips, stuffed moss into the wound, bit down on a stick to keep from biting off my own tongue. Every breath was fire, every heartbeat a war drum. I didn't sleep. I shivered through the dark, muttered names I hadn't spoken in decades, begged the forest, or whatever lives inside it, to let me see the sun one more time. At dawn I awoke to the sound of crows. They circled above me, not out of malice, just curiosity. They could smell death, but they weren't sure if it was mine yet. Neither was I. I sat up, slowly. The bleeding had slowed. My vision returned, blurry but real. I was alive. Barely, but alive. And sometimes, that's enough. I tore a branch into a crude crutch and began the slow descent into deeper woods where no prince had ever dared go, where no map had dared draw. I didn't know if I'd find shelter, didn't know if I'd find anyone, but I knew one thing. I was no longer his hound. I was something else now. Something dangerous. Because they shot the hunter and left him breathing.
The forest saved me, but it didn't forgive me. They say the forest has no memory, that each fallen leaf is forgotten by the branch, each footprint erased by rain. But they're wrong. The forest remembers everything, especially the ones who bled into its roots. I walked, or rather, I limped, for days. My shoulder burned like it was on fire. Fever came and went, tugging at my mind like a thief in the night. I hallucinated once, saw a deer watching me with eyes that looked like my mother's. I tried to apologize. The deer said nothing and vanished. I passed the place where I had once set traps for wolves, past the tree where I carved my initials at 13, before I knew what it meant to own a name. Everything was still there, unchanged. But I was not. The forest didn't welcome me. It didn't guide me. It simply tolerated me like it does with wounded animals, watching, waiting.
On the fourth night, I collapsed near a grove of black birches. My body had given up. I had nothing left, no strength, no direction, no blood to spare. I thought I would die there, and maybe I did, in a way, because I didn't wake alone. A man stood over me, old, hair like frost, eyes deep as dry wells, his beard braided with bone, fingers rough like bark. He didn't speak, just watched me breathe. I reached for my blade. I had none. He dropped something at my side, a flask. I drank. It was bitter, herbal, familiar. Sleep took me again. When I woke, I was in a hollow den built beneath roots, warm, dim, heavy with the scent of moss and pine. My wound had been packed with herbs, my fever broken. The man sat nearby, sharpening something with a stone. Not a weapon, a wooden carving. Antlers. He still didn't speak. Days passed like smoke, formless, quiet, drifting. He fed me roots and broth, cleaned the wound without flinching. Once he pressed his palm to my chest and muttered something in a language I didn't know. Or maybe I once did, when I was young enough to believe trees had souls. I asked him his name. He didn't answer. So I gave him one. Ash. Because he smelled like burned wood, like something old that had once burned bright. When I was strong enough to walk again, he led me, not with words but gestures, through the forest's forgotten veins, places no map had drawn, clearings where stones stood in perfect circles, streams that sang in tones I hadn't heard since childhood, trees marked not by axes, but by symbols, runes I didn't understand, but somehow respected. Ash didn't kill, but he hunted, in his way, for mushrooms, for fallen eggs, for bark that could be boiled into tea. He showed me how to catch warmth in a hollow log, how to read the wind through the way pine needles trembled. I was the royal hunter once, but in his forest, I was a student again. The old me would have laughed, mocked the simplicity, craved steel and fire, but I had lost the right to laugh, and something about Ash's silence made me feel more spoken to than the king's entire court ever had. One night, while watching the fire crackle, I asked, "Why did you help me?" He didn't answer immediately, just stirred the pot, then looked up and said, "You were already dead. I just gave you time to bury yourself properly." I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, from truth, because he was right. The man who once served a crown had died on that cliff. The one who crawled into this forest, he was something else now. One morning, weeks later, Ash handed me something wrapped in deer hide. Inside, a bow, hand-carved, not elegant, not royal, raw, honest. I ran my fingers along its spine. It fit perfectly in my grip. He nodded once, then walked away. That was the last time I saw him. I searched for him for days, found only footprints leading into the mists, and a single carved antler left in the hollow where we slept. I kept it, still have it. That winter, I lived like the animals I once hunted, and made a shelter, fished, hid when snow fell too heavy. I grew lean, quiet, part of the trees. I found places where the nobility's boots had never stepped, groves thick with silence, trails marked only by hooves and claw, and I listened, really listened, to the birds warning each other, to the wind changing course, to the earth shifting beneath roots. I no longer feared the forest. I feared myself, what I'd done in its name, what I had become under banners and commands. Ash had shown me mercy, but the forest, it offered me something rarer, a second chance. Not to go back, but to disappear the right way, to leave behind the man I was, the hound, the blade, the servant, and become something wilder. Not wolf, not man, just watcher. That spring I climbed the highest ridge near the old hunting grounds, watched a royal party pass below. New uniforms, new faces, but the laughter was the same. The arrogance, the weightless cruelty. One of the riders loosed an arrow at a bird mid-flight. Missed. They all laughed. I didn't. I simply turned, disappeared into the trees, and let the sound fade. The hunter was gone, but the forest had gained a shadow.
Now I just wait, not to be found, but to be remembered. If you're hearing this, if these words ever reach someone, somehow, don't come looking for me. The path you'd take no longer exists, not because the trees swallowed it, but because the man who walked it doesn't cast a shadow anymore. I don't live in fear now. I don't hide, but I also don't belong. Not to the world beyond the tree line. Not to the kingdom I once served. Not to the name they gave me. I belong only to this silence. To the crows that visit in the early light. To the roots that curve gently around the bones I've buried, some animal, some not. And to the wind that sometimes still carries the sound of hooves I can't forget. Yes, I remember them. All of them. The ones I hunted, the ones I helped, the ones I hurt. Especially the boy who used to smile when I returned with food in my arms. The one who said I was the bravest man he knew. The one who stopped smiling when I became the king's tool. He never said it, but I saw it in his eyes. Disappointment has no accent. It's just quiet, like the space between arrows. I think about the prince sometimes, wonder if he ever tells the story, the old hound who ran. Maybe he even made a joke of it, a toast at some banquet, a story to make girls gasp and lords chuckle. Remember the one I let live? He didn't let me live. He let me change. And in doing so gave me something the crown never could. Clarity. I was the royal hunter, and I thought that meant I mattered. That if I served long enough, bled clean enough, followed every order with a bowed head, I'd be remembered. I was wrong. You don't become legend by obeying. You become legend by surviving the truth. And the truth is this: I killed for men who never looked me in the eye. I hunted beasts with more honor than the lords I fed. I buried friends without names and watched boys become monsters because no one told them no. And when I finally refused, I was punished for remembering I was human. So now I sit beneath this tree, the one with roots that curl like fingers and bark that smells like old smoke. I have no mirrors, no fire, no warmth beyond what I build with shaking hands. But I have time, and time has taught me something important. The forest does not forgive, but it listens. It heard my bones crack.
It heard my blood fall. It heard me scream that night when I pulled the arrow from my chest with teeth clenched like a dying wolf. And it didn't answer, but it didn't turn away. That was enough. Because sometimes being heard is all a man has left. So if you do hear this, if some fool boy finds my words carved into bark or buried in stone, don't honor me. Don't call me hero. I wasn't. I was obedient, then broken, then quiet. But I am not sorry. Not anymore. Because in the end, when the leaves cover my body and the moss pulls me into the earth, I will have left nothing for the crown to use. No name, no grave, no story to twist into song. Only this: I was the hunter, and I died standing still, watching the world forget me on purpose. Because forgetting, sometimes, is the kindest kind of freedom.